It's Talking Pints, and last night we had Ken Livingstone telling us how awful Brexit was. Tonight we've got somebody who came out very strongly in favour of leave and campaigned hard for it, somebody who's been sitting in the House of Commons since 1987. So we're going to have to find out what motivates you, David Davis, to have stayed in politics. But firstly, cheers and welcome.
Cheers.
He's not drinking a pint, but that's okay.
I was going to say, less of the veteran, if you don't mind.
How can I describe anybody that sat in the House of Commons since 1987?
Yeah.
There aren't many MPs that have been there longer than you.
No, but about one or two. But the answer to your question is there's always a battle to fight. Yeah. Always a battle to fight, whether it's Brexit or whether it's civil liberties or the rule of law or immigration or whatever it is. There's always a battle to fight. And it was interesting when I became Brexit secretary. I thought, well, somebody else will pick up all my, the civil liberty stuff and the rule of law stuff. Nobody really did.
No.
So when I came back out, I'm
going to come to the civil liberty stuff.
I had a full brief when I came out.
I'm going to come to the civil liberty stuff in a minute. But David, you had a successful career in business. Yeah. You worked with Tate and Lyle. You had a very good position at a young age. You were, famously a territorial army soldier and all the rest of it. And you went into politics. Because you believed in stuff and you clearly believed in what Thatcher was trying to do, because that's the period when you joined. When you joined that House of Commons, you'd have been surrounded by people who'd, had a good war, entrepreneurs, people who'd risen up through the ranks of the trade unions from working on shop floors on the mines. And the point I'm making is that Parliament you joined was full of people with real experience of the real world, and you were just one of those. But now, doesn't it feel a bit odd to be in Parliament with people who, frankly, too many of them have come straight out of the same university with the same degree? Well,
there's quite a lot of that. When you're right, when I first joined, my two predecessor MPs were the last two double-decorated members of the House of Commons. They each had a military cross and DSO. Yeah? And one of my tests is to say to myself, what would they think? Today their hair would be curling.
On lots of issues, I'm sure.
Lots of issues, but it's become more careerist over the years. There's no doubt about that. I think also the tenure's shortened slightly. That people are there for less time. And so I'm unusual, whereas I don't think I would have been unusual in the length of time I've been in back when I arrived, as it were. Also, bluntly, the prestige of the House of Commons has gone down. Whether it was expenses or before that, or the sort of John Major era of the sleaze of one to another. Yeah. All those things, I think, have altered the tenor of it. The other thing that's happened, bluntly, is, it's very, very visible at the moment, but the changes to the rules and so on, actually the House has less influence and less power than it used to have. At the moment, it's ridiculous. It's like a parish council at the moment.
And that's because power's been centralised more and more.
Yeah. Every act of Parliament now that goes through is what they call programmed. Now, there's a guillotine, Yeah. So, you can get 3 minutes. But now, you may be used to 3 minutes
in the European Parliament. That was good.
That's precisely what you got. Yeah. But, if you've got big issue to fight over, you need 10 minutes at least to talk about whether we should bomb Syria, or whether we should go into Afghanistan. Or, you can't do that in 3 minutes, And also, the people who had experience, the ex-cabinet ministers, the people who had maybe served in the forces and so on, they get a bit longer at the beginning. Now it's much, much more sort of tick box, so many minutes each. And it does rather force, and I don't blame my colleagues for this, but it does rather force them to a circumstance of sort of giving the local press release in their speech rather than making a very...
Because the power of debate, isn't it? And this happens in Parliament, and I'm a great believer that every pub's a Parliament. Well, no, I know, I really mean it, because people come together and you listen to different points of view, and you say, well, do you know what? I've never thought of it like that. Yeah. The real power of parliamentary debate is you've got a chamber with lots of people in it, a conversation that's going on, and a vote that happens shortly thereafter, and that people do actually change their minds.
And people can challenge.
Yep.
People can challenge.
Yes.
And that's the most important thing.
And that's not really happening,
Not at all. Not at all. You make a speech. Throughout all of Parliament until the last week when I was pinged, so I couldn't be there, believe it or not, I've tried to be actually in the chamber. rather than talking through a screen. Because nobody can intervene on you through a screen, where if you're in a chamber, somebody will challenge you. And that actually makes your speech better. You know, if you've got to make your speech robust to challenge, it makes it better. And that's not true at the moment, and it's much less true with the time constraints. So, you know, if you've only got 3 minutes, are you going to give way to anybody? No, you're not.
No, you're not.
You know, so there's been a really quite serious reduction, and governments, successive governments. I mean, Thatcher was accused of it. She wasn't really most to blame. Major, Blair, Brown, and Cameron have all centralised, and that's continued. And that's continued.
David, one thing that's amazed me during the pandemic is the extent to which government have, it seems almost gleefully, centralised not just power to the centre, but almost treated our liberties as if they own it. Oh, we're told, on the 19th of July, it's Freedom Day, as if it's their freedom, they own it, and they're giving it to us, and we should be very, very grateful. And I kind of grew up, I think, thinking the same thing as you, that this was a liberty-loving nation, a nation that had stood up and fought for liberty, sacrificed much for liberty, not even just for itself, but actually for others around the world. What has happened to us? Because from what I can see, every time the government puts forward actually quite bad legislation, you're just about, I may be wrong here, but it seems you're just about the only MP that raises any objection.
Well, I'm not the only one.
All right, but how many are there?
But there are, you're talking half a dozen. You know,
half a dozen
out of 6.
1%.
Yeah, I mean, this started right at the beginning, back on March 23rd in the first, when we went from basically saying we're going to try and tough this out. I think that was really Boris's strategy. To all of a sudden, wallop, we had the COVID emergency bill. And what the COVID emergency bill was, it wasn't just take powers themselves. Other bills in the past have done that. The infamous 1984 Health Act. I always think 1984 is a great year. Through to the contingents of the Civil Contingencies Act. But all of those required the government to come back within. They could make the decision, but come back within 5 days and get Parliament to approve it. They threw all that out the window. And what was interesting was the Labour Party did not resist at all. They thought that they got a tremendous concession by having a sort of 6-month rubber... Well, they called it a sunset clause. Actually, it's a rubber stamp clause because you couldn't change anything. So basically, government comes through and says, here's all our package of proposals, yes or no. You know, and actually, it's quite a brave MP that says no to everything in the middle of a pandemic. But, you know, so it really altered the balance of power. And since then, I mean, you've got about 45 members of the CRG.
I mean, that has grown a bit.
That's grown. But interestingly, I mean, you know, if you
taken a long time, though, hasn't it?
It's taken time. But what's sort of happened, ironically, in all of this, is quite a few MPs are suddenly discovering the importance of liberty. You know, the battles over freedom, you'll remember these. I haven't always had many allies ever, but, you know, sometimes the way the politics play, we could do something about it. But I think now a lot of people are thinking, actually, freedom includes my freedom to go to a nightclub, my freedom to go on holiday, you know, my freedom to go to work. The sort of very, very fundamental things. And suddenly, because freedom is a very elusive concept, until it's taken away.
Yeah, once you've lost it, you know what it is.
Exactly. And that, you know, and you're right. You see, this country, I mean, basically, we own our freedom. The government doesn't.
And we lend it to them. The elections, we lend them
That's
power.
the concept.
Yeah.
Now, we always know that governments have got sticky hands. You give them something, they don't give it back. So, I mean, infamously, in the Second World War, we had ID cards, theoretically, to be able to stop would-be German spies in the street. That wasn't really a big thing.
No, it's parachutists dressed as nuns, I think.
All of those,
things,
fantasies. But when did we get them back? When did we have to get? When we could give up?
1950.
52, I think it was. Thereabouts. And the reason was because juries were refusing to convict people for not carrying them. So that was another of our institutions defending freedom more than the government does. And I'm afraid all governments are the same in that respect. But, you know, Tory, Labour.
Well, you are valiantly fighting this, and indeed on very similar issues. You fought a by-election back in 2008, so you've always believed in this, and it's very, very important. But David, I must take you back to. You might not want to, but I must take you back to 2005. You know, you were the front runner to become the Tory leader. and this fella called Cameron, who we'd never heard of, really, with his sort of polished red cheeks, and he turns up, and in fact, I think I'm right in saying you were such an odds-on favourite that one of the big bookmakers has stopped taking money on you.
They did, yeah.
And somehow the outsider, this younger fella Cameron, comes through and wins, and I guess you would have been Prime Minister, but life didn't work out that way. What went wrong, David? I mean,
well, I made a terrible speech for a start.
Do you try to erase it, or do you still think about it?
No. I mean, I made a bad speech at party conference. That's the first thing. And that's my fault. Nobody else's.
Yeah.
All right. But off the back of that, the sort of media pack decided, we've got possibility of change, and they veered towards that. And although it's generally accepted that I won all the debates on television, the next 5 debates didn't matter. It's too late. It's done.
It was done.
And that's life's like that. So, things turn, and you just have to live with it. Nixon's not a great hero of modern times, but he said one thing that I agree with, and that is there's no shame in getting knocked down. It's not getting back up that's the shame.
Yeah. Well, and you certainly did that because when the referendum came, the Brexit referendum came, you threw yourself into it completely, and we shared the stage on a few occasions together and travelled around the country, and we had Labour's Kate Hoey with us, and we tried to present a very broad platform, actually, of different people that wanted Brexit, and you believed in it very strongly, and we got it. And then you found yourself in Mrs May's cabinet, and there you were. You were the Brexit secretary, and it was very difficult for all of us on the outside to really read where this was going, but a lot of people had deep suspicions that it might just not be going in the right direction, that we might be heading for Brino, Brexit.
They were well-founded suspicions.
And well, as it turned out, they were. I kind of think your body language during that period told us pretty much what you were really thinking, but you stayed loyal and you did what you could until, and I just want to know about this because the great Chequers meeting, the Prime Minister, the Cabinet is summoned, and she's going to sort of talk about the final shape of the deal with Brussels, and there were stories about you having to leave mobile phones out of the room.
All of that.
And even not have cars at Chequers, is that right? So
all of that.
And so as much as you can, just what happened?
Well, first thing to say is that she told me what her proposal was. I mean, there'd been a long tension from the December of the year before when she conceded the full alignment for Northern Ireland, which became the pivot. And I said to her at that time, you can't do this. This is contrary to everything you've said. We've got to have it done. Anyway, there's a long battle between there and the middle of the year, June, I think it was. And on the Monday, she told me what she wanted to do, and I said, that won't work. And we'd had a lot of times when she said, I want to do this. And I said, well, look, as it stands, that won't work. Let me try and modify it to make it tolerable, tenable for a Brexiteer. And I tried to do that, but as you can imagine, I mean, it was so far off the wall, it wasn't possible. So on the Wednesday, I made a valiant attempt, but on the Wednesday, I made my proposal. It was rejected within an hour, right? So on the Thursday, I briefed my team. I said, I'm going to be resigning. Because you expect Chequers to be rigged, the vote to be predetermined and so on. And that's pretty much what happened. 4 of us opposed, myself, Boris, and 2 others. I won't embarrass them. But and
it wouldn't embarrass me. I put them on a roll of honour. But anyway, go on.
I haven't asked their permission.
Yeah, no, sure.
So I thought, well, this is not the place to resign, where they control the media, they control your time. So I said, and on the Sunday night, I decided I'll do it on a Sunday night because then I can control the story. I mean, as you know, every piece of the British media is on one side or other of the battle. Divide, and they would make my resignation into their story. I didn't want that. I wanted it to be for clear reasons and only the reasons I wanted to put across. And so I did that on Sunday night, and Monday morning I did an interview with John Humphreys on the Today programme and laid it all out. And all of a sudden the Tory party was in 2 pieces. And that's what. One of the reasons.
No, listen. It was very important that you did resign.
Yeah. If we had, Boris said to me, I don't think I'm breaking too much confidence.
He didn't want to resign, really, did he?
Not really, no. But he said to me about a year or so ago. We had a private conversation about a year or so ago, relatively private. He said, "Well," he said,
dear.
"you know," he said, "if you hadn't resigned," he said, "we'd still be here going through the 33rd variant of the."
I think that's no. You resigned. Well, I think that forced Boris into resigning, frankly.
Well, you have to get him and ask him.
But I don't think he's coming on here now.
Maybe not, but you know.
But you did it, and thank God you did, because
we're out.
Because that led to the Spartans, which led to the impasse, which led to the European elections, which I was able to, really smash the Conservative. Get rid of Mrs May, basically, with the Brexit party, and we've got it. It's not perfect. Northern Ireland's not perfect by far. Fisheries isn't perfect by far.
There's about 3 years more negotiations to happen.
Yeah, there's more to happen. But hey, we're in a pretty good place.
Yeah, we're talking from outside, which is a better way. I mean, one of the problems of being inside, it was very, very difficult to get Whitehall off their knees.
Yeah.
They were trying to negotiate as supplicants, which of course is the way the European Union normally negotiates.
And these were the terms that were agreed right at the very beginning, and we were always fighting
the famous timing problem.
I know. David, finally, does David Davis just keep running for Parliament, keep being an MP, and keep battling on forever?
For as long as the battle's there. I mean,
there'll always be battles there.
For as long as the battle's there, and nobody else wants to do the same battle. That's the point. When none of us are irreplaceable.
No.
And hopefully others will pick up the baton. They're beginning to. I think actually, COVID may lead to a number of young Tory MPs saying to themselves, actually, freedom matters.
Well, I hope you're right.
And if that does, then fine, I can retire.
Thank you for joining us, David. Well, that was David Davis, and I tell you what, he's not going anywhere. He's definitely standing in the next general election. You heard it here first.
That's true.
On GB News. It's true. There we are. Thank you, David.